Morning, everyone, and welcome to MxD. I want to get a show of hands because before we go through our program, and there's some incredible speakers over the next 2 days. It begins with Dr. Mori from DMG Mori, and it just goes from there. How many people have been to MxD before? Nice, we got a lot of new faces. I love new faces. How many people that hadn't been to MxD had heard about us before this event? All right, I'm going to tell you a little bit about MxD, and then I'm going to plant some seeds that I hope you're going to think about as you hear from all of our speakers over the next 2 days, because we're going to come back around to those seeds at the end of the conference with the closing panel, okay? So what is MxD? MxD stands for Manufacturing Times Digital. We are the nation's digital manufacturing and cybersecurity institute. We're a public-private partnership, nonprofit, partnered with the Department of Defense, Department of War, I got to get used to saying that now, but the War Department, to really help strengthen US manufacturing. We are actually the second oldest of 18 institutes around the nation. 8 of us today are partnered with the Department of Defense. Keith DeVries in the front row is our sponsor within the Department of Defense. You're going to hear from him later in the show, or tomorrow actually, right? Tomorrow. And then there's others, 8 of those are defense, 6 of those are energy, 2 of them are commerce, right? We're all kind of focused on the same thing. How do we strengthen US manufacturing? So, where's our focus? We believe that in order for advanced manufacturing to be successful, you need to have a foundation of a digitally enabled and cyber secure base. It's data. How do we have that stream of data throughout the product development lifecycle, from design through production, through sustainment in the field, and ultimately end of life? From the top of the supply chain, from the biggest manufacturers to the smallest manufacturers in our nation. I always throw this data point out. Less than 2% of US manufacturing are large manufacturers. The bulk of US manufacturing are small. How small? 75% have less than 20 employees. So we need to think about advanced manufacturing across the entire US manufacturing base. And our mission is to make sure that that digital foundation is built in a cyber secure way. So that as we implement AI, computer vision, digital twins, all these cool tech that sits on top of it, they can succeed because of that base. Does this make sense? Okay, let's keep going. How we execute this mission. Convene, advance, empower. You are part of the convening. When you bring really smart people together, you get them to talk to each other, share their thoughts, share their ideas, share their successes, share their failures. That's when innovation happens. We listen for the failures, and then we work with the federal funds matched to private investment, the public-private part, to solve those with either technology or people. Advancing technology, innovation, and adoption. It started out 11 years ago, focused just on new tech that was coming. 11 years ago, Industry 4.0, advanced manufacturing were ideas. They hadn't really been put into practice. Over the last 11 years, and especially when you think about the supply chain, we've started focusing on adoption. How do we help small businesses adopt technology? If you get a tour of the factory floor, I encourage you to take it. You'll get to see things like the sensor kit. Take legacy equipment, and for low cost and low effort, we can put digital on it. So that you can start doing things like predictive maintenance. You can start doing things like real-time based analytics on your operations. On the workforce side, I'm really excited to say I can now say this number. We are over 300,000 people that we've upskilled through our programs. It's a huge number. We're really proud of it. There's 12 million people working in manufacturing. It is really important that we make sure that the workforce in the factories have the skills they need to succeed. And we work with our partners to identify those jobs through our readiness guides. Once you identify those roles and the skills, we work with partners to build out the training curriculum that are certified. Micro-learnings, micro-certs. Turn our workforce into continuous learners so that throughout their careers, they're growing with the skills they need to succeed. Hopefully this is making sense and resonating. We don't do this alone. All of you in this room, how many folks here are MxD members? All right, I invite the rest of you to become MxD members because that's how we execute our mission. We work with our partners. Now, we do work with non-members sometimes, but we try to make sure that we're working to support our members and with our members to execute this mission. The government, the Department of War, is our #1 partner. They are our sponsor. Manufacturers, large and small, solution providers, academics. Wow, the fonts got up and down on that one. Something happened. Academics, research universities, large and small, and also like-minded nonprofits. These are the people we work with to execute this mission. 30% of our membership are manufacturers. We've been really focused on growing small businesses in the space, so we now have a growth in the SMMs, the small and medium manufacturers that are in our network. We set some pretty aggressive goals for 2028. For those that don't know, every 5 years, the Department of War reviews the institutes to make decisions about, is this still needed? Are you doing a good job? Are you relevant, et cetera. In 2023, we went through our last review. We passed with flying colors. Thank you. That's really thanks to all the work of our members and our partners. We set some pretty aggressive targets for 28. How do we upskill 1 million workers? Take that 300,000 to 1 million. How do we go work with 10,000 manufacturers so we can help them digitalize and secure their operations? We are sponsored by the Department of War. There's a focus here on the warfighter. We don't do digital for a soldier in the field or a sailor in the Navy. Where we're focused on is, if you don't know, the Department of Defense, Department of War has an internal manufacturing capability called the Organic Industrial Base. We're working to help take that 1950s at best solutions and bring them into the modern world. Again, working with our members to adopt this. And we'll talk more about this over the coming days. But before we look to the future, I want to look to the past. This month, 80 years ago, we celebrated the end of the global conflict, which was World War II. Right? It touched millions and millions of lives around the world, and not in a great way. But there's something that happened during World War II. When we celebrated that victory, it wasn't done alone. It was a national need that generated a national response. Right? That level of response, in some ways, is what I think we should be challenged to think about today with the industrial base. First, we cannot and must respect the fact that bravery answered the call first. So our soldiers, our sailors, our Marines, our airmen, they stepped up. They ran into the fray. They ran into the battle to fight. But for every one of those frontline troops, there were between 4 and 6 rear echelon troops supporting them. Right? This was men and women in uniform that were feeding them, that were equipping them, that were taking care of them and bandaging them back up. But it wasn't just that part that solved this. The home front stepped up. My family's from Italy and Ireland, so they were over there when all this happened. But I hear from people that were here that we planted victory gardens. We knew we didn't make enough food. So to extend our food production, people planted gardens in their backyard so that they could actually grow what they needed. We started buying war bonds so that we can invest in building out this infrastructure. The nation went green in the 40s. So green is not a new thing. They've recycled at record levels, like toothpaste tubes, paper, metal, bones. By the way, I didn't know, but bones are used to make munitions, among other things, right? The grease inside the bones is used to grease equipment back then, right? We really took everything we could to extend our resources because we didn't have enough natural resource. But man, did the industrial base respond. The whole strategy was, we need to make everything we need to equip these warfighters around the world. They stood up and they said, we're going to do all-out production. By the end of the war, half of the world's production was coming from the United States, nearly tripling our capacity in just 4 years. Chrysler, they took what they knew how to do, build cars, doing mass production lines, and they applied it to building tanks. The Detroit Army tank plant, they started building tanks, first the M3 Lee and later the iconic M4 Sherman, using mass production. They built this factory that built these tanks, and before the first tank rolled off, the line before the walls were finished being built. So they sprang into action and stood up an entire factory to build something in weeks. They weren't the only ones. Ford built the Willow Run bomber plant. At its peak, they were making 24 B-24 bombers every day. You know, somebody in marketing had a field day with that. 124 every hour, 24 a day, right? But again, they took what they knew how to do, which was build cars, and they applied it to this space. Before the war in 1941, the automotive industry produced 3 million cars. During the rest of the war, they produced 139. We took the entire automotive industry and pivoted it. GM is an indication of what they did. Now, give me a second. I'm going to read this out. During the war years, they produced 120 million artillery shells, 39 million cartridge cases, 206,000 aircraft engines, 13,000 Navy fighter planes, 97,000 aircraft propellers, 301,000 gyro compasses for those aircraft so they knew where to go, 38,000 tanks, 854,000 trucks, 190,000 cannons, 1.9 million machine guns, 3.1 million carbines, 3.8 million electric motors, 11 million fuses, 360 million bearings, 198,000 engines, diesel engines. We took our industrial base and we pivoted it. But it wasn't just that. We also had to solve problems. We built 300,000 aircraft during the war. If you look at history, World War I aircraft were mostly built with wood, cloth. We shifted this to aluminum. Problem was, we didn't know how to produce enough aluminum. This is where public-private partnerships came into play. Alcoa worked with the US government. The US government put $450 million into building out capacity for aluminum, from processing ore to finished materials. Alcoa invested $300 million of its own money, nearly a dollar for dollar investment. We went from producing 149,000 tons of aluminum before the war to 1.25 million at the peak. We shifted to meet the needs of that production. It wasn't just the large manufacturers. Singer sewing machines. Fun story, my wife's great-grandmother took a Singer sewing machine to Madagascar when her husband was the Postmaster General. Looks exactly like that, and I actually have that sewing machine at home. So here's a sewing machine, 100-year-old sewing machine. If you ever open it up, it is fine-grade parts inside. They were asked by the US government to make 1911 pistols. Now, they didn't make a lot of them, but people recognized that these were the highest quality pistols ever produced during the war. Why? Because they were really good at machining fine parts with high precision. They took that skill, they pivoted it, and they made something else. It wasn't the only thing they did, but it gives you an indication of, like, we took the strengths we had and we pivoted them. Here's another fun story. Mattatook, they used to make furniture nails for upholstery. They had the ability to modify slight metal, bend it into shape. They started making M1 Garand clips. If you ever watch a movie, the ping that comes off at the last round, they made 3 million clips a week for the US military. They took their capability, they shifted it. Not just them, toy makers, Lionel Toy Trains. They were very proud of the fact that they started making gyroscopes for Navy ships and navigation tools. They advertised about it because they had a pride that this was something they could do to help support it. Fun little story, they didn't want to let the kids go without toys, so they made paper-based cardboard trains that you could buy, fold up, and still use, so that the kids get to play a little bit at Christmas. This is a story that I like. Small manufacturers, small innovators, they are the heart also of innovation, right? No shame to the big companies, you guys do a lot of incredible things, but here's an interesting story. Andrew Jackson Higgins had a boat. Now, the official story was his boat was a shallow bottom boat that could go into the bayou for oil and gas exploration. I like the better story. It was a rum runner boat. During the Prohibition, they used them to get booze in and out. I think that's a fun story. But he said, I can build a boat to get troops onto the shores. The Higgins boat is a landing craft that put troops around the world in a safe way. My father's village was liberated in Italy by a Higgins boat with US Army soldiers being deployed in the south of Italy, and they worked their way up. D-Day is this picture. A small manufacturer is the one that created this innovation, and they were able to build them and meet the needs of the times. General Eisenhower at the time, but he later became President Eisenhower, said, this is the man who won the war for us. Right? Small business innovation came out of it. All of this was possible because of the response of the industrial base. Right? We were not the powerhouse that we became during that time. We pivoted, we took advantage of new technology, we took advantage of the entire supply chain to make that happen. But workforce was a challenge. Men went to war, not enough people to fill the factories. We all know the iconic pictures, Rosie the Riveter, right? Women entered the workforce in record numbers to fill the needs. They were machinists. So this actually is a picture from Republic Drill and Tool Company here in Chicago, Illinois. 4 months of training, these women could produce high-quality tools that were needed to support their shop. Let's look at welders. This is a fun story. This is the Ingalls Shipbuilding Corps, and I'm going to butcher this one, in Pascagoula, Mississippi. These were the champion welders among the women's department. Vera, the woman here, smiling kind of in the middle, she was the champion of Ingalls 2 years in a row. A shipyard in Oregon, the Oregon shipyard, said, our welders are better than your welders. They had a weld off. Vera competed with an Herminia Strimsky. She was faster, higher quality. 24 minutes to complete the challenge, 95.5% accurate against 29 minutes and 93.5. So they filled these jobs. They were also riveters. These two women are riveters at the Vultee Aircraft Factory. We could not have produced those 300,000 aircraft without women. The women workforce in aircraft went from 1% of the industry to 65% during the war. They filled those jobs. All of this hard work paid off with victory. And man, did they throw a party. But the thing I want to think about is, what did we do to really empower that base? To take that industrial base, to take the best technology solutions that we had, to take the people that are there that are not filling the need and teach them the skills they need to fill the need so that we can rally our nation's industrial base. When Dr. Mori and others speak today, you're going to hear about advanced technology that's being adopted. The tools are all there to meet this need. But tomorrow, in the closing panel, there's a wonderful team. We're going to have some challenges to talk about. Well, could we do it? And what will it take? We saw the pandemic and how with China shutting down, it puts strains on our supply chains. How the beauty of global supply chains becomes an albatross around your neck when those global supply chains shut down. More recently, with the Ukraine conflict, 155 millimeter shell production has made the news. I'm sure most of you heard of this. We can't make enough shells to meet the need. So we're seeing these disruptions happening. It doesn't take a global conflict to cause these disruptions. So we need to ask ourselves, what would it take to be ready? And let's hope we never have to. So think about this question while others are presenting information. And tomorrow when we have our closing panel, bring your questions. This is a great group of people that represent government, industry, big manufacturers, small manufacturers, the private equity community. Ask them these questions about what they think it will take. But more importantly, use this as a way to think about how you can transform your businesses to be more effective, more capable. And let's be honest, you'll make more money through it too.